Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating German philosophical text that puts forward a pretty wild idea that humanity is on the verge of a new stage of evolution, a waking stage, what it calls the meta-human.
Right from the get-go, the book hits you with this startling claim. It says it wasn't written by a person, but secreted, almost like an organic process. The idea is that its philosophy grew out of the compost of history, culture, and even AI, making the collective itself the true author.
Okay, so to really get what they're talking about, we first have to take back a word that's kind of been hijacked by big tech lately. The word meta.
Forget about virtual worlds for a second. In this book, meta is like a ladder you find inside the labyrinth. The point isn't to escape the maze you're in, it's to climb up just high enough to see the whole pattern from above, to finally understand the system that you're a part of.
And this concept isn't just one thing, it unfolds in three different ways. First, you've got meta as behind. Think metaphysics, which looks for the principles behind the physical world. Then there's meta as between, like that incredible process of metamorphosis happening entirely inside the caterpillar. And finally, meta as beyond, that leap from one state to a completely new one. So seeing what's behind, changing from within, and then moving beyond, that's the engine driving this whole idea.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because the book argues that meta isn't just some abstract thought exercise. It's actually a fundamental pattern baked into the universe itself.
Think of the universe as building on itself in layers of complexity, like this upward cascade. First, raw energy organizes itself into physics, then physics organizes into chemistry. Chemistry gets together and forms self-replicating biology, and biology eventually organizes into self-aware consciousness. Well, the book suggests we are right on the edge of the next great leap, where all of our individual conscious minds begin to organize into a collective meta-consciousness.
And this is a perfect way to think about it. You know, a single ant has this tiny brain, a fraction of ours. But an anthill? An anthill can farm, build bridges, even regulate its own climate. It's the same with us. Human civilization has created things like the internet or space travel, things that are way beyond the scope of any single one of us.
And this is the huge difference, right? Unlike an ant in an anthill, a human can actually step back and ask that question. Wait a minute, are we part of something bigger? That very act of becoming aware, of questioning our role in the collective, that's the first spark. That's the first sign of the collective waking up.
So if we run with this idea that civilization is a kind of sleeping organism, what would its anatomy even look like?
Well, the book argues that for centuries, our democracies have been running on this super outdated model of just three powers. But for this organism to really become conscious, its anatomy needs to be way more complex. In reality, it says there are at least 10 different powers at play. You've got the classical powers we all learned about in school: legislative, executive, and judicative. That's our collective will, action, and judgment. But then it gets deeper. There are preconscious powers, like the sensoric, which is like the organism's nervous system sensing its own health. And then the really critical ones, the post-conscious powers, which are all about self-reflection. We're talking about the power to define what's true, the power of our infrastructure, even the power to direct our collective attention. And here's the kicker. The book says most of these deeper powers are just running wild, with basically zero democratic oversight. So how do you fix that? Well, to address this, the book proposes something pretty radical, a brand new institution called a fifth power, which is designed to be the self-awareness network for our collective brain. It's supposed to act like the default mode network in our own brains. You know, that part that just thinks and reflects and imagines when you're not actively focused on a task. It's an organ for collective self-reflection, a function that our current political systems just don't have. And this fifth power would have two parts. There's an ideas chamber, where you'd have 100 different factions, everything from revolutionary socialism to deep ecology, all debating core principles. And then there's a works chamber, where art, music, and literature would respond to and shape those debates. It creates this amazing feedback loop between our ideas and our culture.
This whole thing points to a really fundamental shift in what we value. It's about moving away from our current attention economy, which just rewards whatever is loud and popular, likes, clicks, and follows. Instead, it moves us toward a solidarity economy. And in that system, value is measured by your actual contribution to the whole group. Stuff like sharing tools, mentoring people, maintaining archives. It rewards what's actually helpful, not just what's noisy.
Okay, so here's the big question. How does all of this huge, cosmic, political theory actually connect back to you? This is where it gets really personal, and it's where we see this incredible synthesis of what you'd think are total opposites: socialist collectivism and Nietzschean individualism.
First off, the book just kind of throws out the whole idea of the solid individual. It suggests we're more of a divisible self, what it calls a dividuum. We're less like a single unified king and more like an inner parliament with all these competing voices, roles, and impulses inside us.
And this is where those two big, seemingly clashing ideas become the essential nutrients in that compost we talked about at the beginning. Nietzsche's philosophy, with its radical individualism, gives us the drive to overcome ourselves, the courage to shatter our old identities and question everything. But that could just lead to chaos, right? So that's where socialism comes in. It provides the structure, the principles of solidarity and collective purpose that allows all these self-overcoming people to actually form a new, healthier organism together. You absolutely need both, the fire to break the old and the vessel to build the new.
So think about those moments when you feel like you lose yourself. Maybe you're completely absorbed in a piece of music, or you're hiking in nature, or you're just in that state of deep focus. The book says that's not a bug. It's a feature. It's not some kind of disorder, it's a gateway. It's you getting a little taste of your connection to this larger waking organism.
And that leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to take with you. What if civilization really is a sleeping brain? And what if you are one of its individual neurons, just now starting to fire, contributing to the very moment that it finally begins to wake up?